Excellent. Hello, hello, hello. This is Terry Edwards and of course Drew Edwards, Engaged Recruiters, and welcome to this podcast. And this is a very special podcast because our speaker today, our guest today, is Greg Savage. Now, for those that don't know Greg is despite his youthful looks, Greg's been in the industry for about 4 decades, and I think he's founder of in total of 4 highly successful businesses. And Greg's based in based in Australia, though originally from South Africa. So some of the honours that Greg's achieved is he was LinkedIn's top voice in 2018, Recruitment Hall of Fame. He's considered the most influential Australian business person on Twitter and the most influential recruiter in Australia for the past 60 years, which is remarkable. I think he's only about 25 now. Greg's made some massive contributions to the recruitment industry. One of the reasons we were keen to have Greg on there, and regular listeners will know that this isn't the first time that Greg's been on here, but Greg's just recently published a book called The Savage Truth, which is one of the reasons we got him on here. We're gonna go into the book in a lot more detail. But I've got to say, Greg, thank you very much for agreeing to agree to this podcast and welcome.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Terry, and thank you for that very exaggerated, sort of bloated introduction, which shouldn't have surprised me because I did write it for you. So thank you for reading that out. And also, thank you for telling me at the very last minute that this was a camera job. I thought it was a podcast. I'm in my gym gear. I haven't had a time to pimp and preen myself like I like to. So this is unplugged, I'm afraid. As good as it gets.
You know, before the show, before we sort of started this show, I looked back at our previous episodes of the podcast, and it was July 2015 that you'd done your first episode with us.
Oh, wow.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, I do remember we had some good banter, Terry, and I'm sure we will again today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Greg, before I get into your book, I've just given a brief overview of yourself. Just tell us right now, what are you doing right now, Greg, in terms of your business life?
Yeah, sure. So you touched on the fact that, you know, I was running recruitment companies for 30 years, more probably 2 or 3 in that period of time that took up most of that time. But in the last 7 years, I've been acting as an advisor to recruitment companies. I'm on the board of 14 companies in recruitment or HR tech in Australia and New Zealand and Singapore. And that sounds like a lot. And I guess it is, but you know, you might have between 8 and 10 meetings a year, half day each, a lot of phone calls, a lot of coffees, but it's a great position to be in because it's actually a privilege. Terry, you know, when you've got a lot of experience like I had running my own businesses, you begin to believe your own PR. You begin to think, well, I've got 30 years in experience in recruitment. I know a lot about this, you say quietly to yourself. But then when you go and work with 10 or 12 other companies, of course, I'm there to give them advice, and I hope I do, but I'm learning all the time. I have learned more in the last 7 years, honestly, than I learned in the previous 7, I would say, because I'm on the inside of all these companies, and they're all doing exciting things and fighting the good fights and dealing with technology and challenges that we all face. But I'm on the inside. So plus, you know, I travel a lot, I do a lot of talks. I'm going to be in London next week, a week after actually, doing talks with the REC, and that gives me the chance to meet a lot of people, etc. So mostly I'm an advisor, and I do some public speaking. If you follow my public speaking itinerary closely, Terry, you will notice that it coincides almost precisely with international cricket and rugby matches. And so you'll see me in London next week. And if you look at the schedule, of course, the the Oval Test is on. And then I'm going to be in Japan 4 weeks later to do some highly important work. It just happens to be the finals of the Rugby World Cup. I mean, you get a lot of luck when you're in recruitment, as you know. So that's what I've been doing. And I suppose life is a mixture between hard work, but, you know, I would say I'm at a very fortunate stage where I tend to only work with people I like. I mean, obviously this podcast is an exception, Terry. I work with people I like on projects I like. Work very hard, but probably for 40 weeks of the year work hard. So that's a pretty good balance, I think.
Fantastic, yeah. And I think I'm not sure whether I should say thanks for that plug or not. I'm not. Well, on a serious note, you've written this book called The Savage Truth.
Yes.
Look, you've been around for a long time and you're well known, but what prompted you to finally put pen to paper? Because I'm just fascinated as what prompted you to do it in the first place.
Well, I think it's an interesting story. I'll make it short, but people have been asking me, not a lot of people, one or two people have been saying, you should write a book. One of them, Ross Clement, said, it's an obligation. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, your career covers virtually the history of recruitment in Australia. And I did sort of reflect that I was recruiting 16 years before the internet was invented. And so the change that I've seen, the internet, job boards, social media, phones, mobile phones, smartphones, ATS, all the things that came. So, all the things that came. It is an interesting sort of story, but I still felt, honestly, it's hard work. Who'd read it? And then I gave a speech, and a publisher came up to me after, and she didn't know anything about my background, but she'd heard the speech on leadership. So you should write a book. Anyway, I decided to do it. It took 6 months, almost exclusively written on airplanes and in airports. And
Greg, just
as is typical of me, having started it begrudgingly, I then got enthusiastic, gave it my best shot, and now I'm sort of determined that every recruiter in the world reads it. Because it's a legacy. I'm not saying it's the best recruitment book in the world, but I do think there's a lot to take from it, no matter what stage of recruitment you're at, Terry. You've read it, and hopefully you will agree that as a recruiter or even as a director, you're going to hear some things that will either resonate or be fresh to you. And so I think I'm happy with the final outcome.
Yeah. In fact, I said to you again off camera that your book is the second best book I've read in the recruitment industry. It goes without saying which one I thought was the best, but modesty prevents me from saying anything now. But seriously,
well, Terry, according to Drew, he hasn't seen you read a book since comics that you were reading 20 years ago. So, I'm not sure how much of a compliment that is, but I am grateful for it. And when you say it's the second best book, it's obviously behind your book, right?
Oh, well, modesty prevents me from saying that, Greg. But
well, you said it, so it's okay.
I'll take that. To be second behind your book, I'll take that, because that's a high standard indeed.
Yeah, all joking apart, great book, and I would recommend it to anybody in the industry, regardless of what you're doing. Honestly, all joking apart, a great book.
Thank you. Thank you. It is available now. If you go to my website, here comes the commercial. There's there's a page or a tab says The Savage Book, and you can pre-order it. Most of your listeners are in the UK, I imagine, and I think the platform Book Depository is the best one. It will arrive in mid to late October, so it's there at a discount now. And anyway, I certainly hope that if people do buy it, they'll think it was really good value, because I poured pretty much, I won't say all I know into it. I certainly told a lot of stories. There are 2 or 3 stories, Terry, that I haven't told, and I'm not going to tell here, but the rest are all in there.
Excellent. But you started your early days, like most recruiters, you got into recruitment almost by default when you went across to Australia, and you worked as a recruiter. What were some of your early errors in those days that put you in good stead and helped you later on in your career, Greg, that you'd like to share with us? Well,
yeah, sure. Look, I mean, I would describe myself in the end as a good recruiter, not a great one. I was never top of the leaderboard. I was never one of those really high-flying recruiters. I was pretty good, I suppose, by today's standards, better than most. But I also managed to construct a number of cataclysmic cock-ups that I can recall. One of them happened in London. I was working in the 80s for County Personnel. Now, that was the company that Hayes bought, Terry, to get into recruitment. Yeah. And this was prior to them buying it. It was pre-internet. It was fast-paced. I can tell you all the stories. We did it all on the phone. We were actively discouraged not to go and see clients. That was a waste of time, because we could match so many people. We were making 4 or 5 permanent placements a week, the good recruiters, in accounting this was. And what happens is when a client phoned in, there's no receptionist, right? A consultant would pick up the phone. And if you picked up the phone and the client was registering a job, you would take the job there and then over the phone. And then you would sell your candidates in, Terry. And once you've got your 2, 3, 4, or 5 candidates into the client and interviews arranged, now bear in mind, we hadn't even spoken to the candidates. This is in 1983, it's a Wild West. Then the next consultant would be given the phone. And before the client knew it, he had like 18 interviews. And then we had to get hold of the candidates, which was pretty hard, Terry, because no mobile phones.
Of course, yeah.
So
Of course.
there was a whole technique of getting your good candidates to phone in twice a day, etc. Anyway, sometimes we sent resumes. I made the cataclysmic error, and it went like this. Client called up, he asked for me, and he said, did you send me, I'm going to make up the name now, although this woman's name is burned on my brain. He said, did you send me the resume of Mary Smith? I said, yes. Getting quite excited now, Terry. I thought he wanted to hire her. He said, thank you very much. She currently works for me, and now I know she's looking for a job. I had sent the candidate's resume to her own boss. So maybe people are going to drop off your podcast now thinking what a buffoon. And I was a buffoon. I called that woman for months. I have never spoken to her again. And I don't know what happened to her. I said, Mary, if you're out there, I'm sorry. She's probably, a grandmother like that, by now. This was in the 80s. But it was a lesson. It taught me speed is one thing, urgency is one thing, but quality is the other, and they've got to be in equal measure. And although nobody cared because it was a high-paced environment and there are no consequences for me, she never came back to me. I don't know what happened to her. It's burned me for years that I did that, and it taught me a strong lesson about quality. I also made another quick error. This was a few years later. I was running Recruitment Solutions. I started the company, pretty cocky. I was the director and one of the owners, but also doing a lot of client visits. And I was good at client visits. It's my sweet spot. And I got complacent, and I didn't do my preparation, and I rushed off to see this client, and I sat in front of him, and we did the meeting. And towards the end, when it was my turn to speak, I said to him, so Mr. Klein, do you know much about Recruitment Solutions? And he looked at me and said, yes, Greg, I do. In fact, you placed me here. I thought, oh shit, my company placed me here. I should have checked the database. I said, but I thought I can get away with this. It's a big company. We've got 50 consultants. I don't know every placement. I said, that's good. So our company placed you. He said, no, Greg, you placed me. And as he said it, it all came back to me. It's funny. I even remembered his wife's name as he said it, because I had dealt with him for 2 months. But I was so fast and let's do it that I hadn't done my preparation. And those are 2 embarrassing stories. And there's a worse one, which I'll tell you later. But I guess they taught me a number of things. Quality, consequences of sloppiness. And, I also learned when I was working at John P. Young & Associates, I got into recruitment at 21. And Terry, my first job was an executive search firm. The next youngest recruiter in the business was 46. and we sold retainers. And so my first 3 years was retainers and selling client paid advertising where, this was, and the client paid for a display ad, cost $3,000 and my salary was $10,000. So, I had to really believe in our value to sell that. And it's something I've obviously over the years, I've been in contingent recruitment, but I've always fought and tried to teach my teams that we have a value. We must believe in the value. Don't commoditize it. Get exclusivity. Retainers, sure, but if not, at least exclusivity, because you can only do quality work and give commitment to the client if the client gives commitment to you. I'm sure you agree with me.
100%. 100%.
Sorry, you add something to that. Sorry, buddy.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, again, anyone that's followed us for even a short amount of time know that that's sort of one of our key philosophies as well. And one of the reasons that we were sort of so excited to get you on the show again is because a lot of what you said and say in the book, we agree with 100%. And it was just, I think one of the big mistakes that you can make as a recruiter is almost devaluing what the value that you provide to clients.
Yeah, look, I agree, Drew. And if you don't value it, it's very hard to sell your value. And that's why recruiters, collapse back on their fees, because they don't actually believe in it, and they, if we all come back to being keyword bloody spamming, drones, then our only differentiation is speed and price. And if your differentiation is only speed and price, you're on a slippery slope to recruiting hell, because there's always someone who's going to do it cheaper. That's true of any economic marketplace. And in terms of speed, well, guess what? Technology will thrash us on matching keywords and forwarding resumes to people. So that's not, we've got to go the other way, actually. And linked with that was another lesson when I was younger. I treated the client as king in my mind, right? And I've actually learned that the thing that causes burnout in recruitment and gives us the biggest frustration and anxiety isn't the hard work or the offers turned down. It's working with dickheads. Working with dickheads is the worst thing.
Yeah.
When I say dickheads, I don't mean your colleagues, although occasionally you stumble across those, but mostly it's your clients. And what I learned after about 3 years is it's okay to fire a client. It's good to fire a client. And when I say fire, I don't say in an aggressive way, but to explain to a client why you can no longer work with him or her because they are not operating in a partnership way, which is in their best interest and yours and the candidates for that matter. But if they want to act in that way, then we have to move on and give our candidates to somebody else. And it's a brilliant feeling when you do it, but there's so many recruiters who, because the client is king and we've got to own the client, you know, it's not like that actually, particularly, and I know it's the same in the UK, you've got a shortage of skills in certain areas, even though you guys are doing the best to screw up your economy, you've got a shortage of skills. And if we've got the candidates, we don't have to deal with dickheads, you know?
100%.
And there's a difference between a dickhead and a demanding client. Now, a demanding client is fair enough. They're going to pay our fee. They expect good service. They expect quality. That's okay. But I'm talking about the client who doesn't return your calls, who won't take your advice, who pulls the job at the last minute, who tries to negotiate your fee after you've done the work. It's not worth it, guys. You agree with me, I'm sure.
It's funny, like, one of the things that we see is that recruiters accept behavior from clients. So they accept bad behavior from clients. They accept dickhead clients, but they wouldn't accept it in their own personal life. And it's like, you spend, really, if you're a recruitment business owner, you spend more time dealing with clients than you do spend with your own family at times. So it's important that you're actually bringing people on who value what you do, treat you with respect, and work with you on almost like a partnership basis, because then you can get them better results as well. So yeah, I agree with that.
It's absolutely right. And it takes, you see, that leads me on to something else, just slightly here. One of the things I learned is that the first thing you have to achieve with a client to do the sorts of things, Drew, that you're talking about, is you have to earn credibility in their eyes. So in a client meeting or in any other initial, if you come across as credible, and by credible, I mean the client assesses that you can help them and have expertise to bring to the table, not just resumes, expertise, credibility, then the client will start to think that they might work with you as a partner. When a client gives a job to 8 recruiters from the same job, they're not giving any equity, any credibility to those recruiters. They're treating them as a human database and just lick me your resume. So those are some lessons I learned. No, well, it's not. I agree with you. It's not you shouldn't call them a client because they don't treat you as a partner. They treat you as a supplier, and even worse than that, really, because you can have respect for your supplier. So there are 2 or 3 other lessons, Terry, if you want me to, as a recruiter, before we go into other levels. Do you want to talk about those? Or just
that's right. You really hit the nail on the head there, and and Drew sort of endorsed it. And just a couple of things. Many years ago, and I'm going back 20 years ago, manager said to me when I was a search consultant, the fees that you insist that you get from your client is merely a reflection of what you believe you're worth. So if you don't believe you're worth 20, 25%, you can't ask for it with conviction. He said so, and he was talking to the whole team, and he said this: you guys have got an issue with the fees, and at the time we couldn't go below 18%. He said that says more about you than anything else. It's got nothing to do with the market, and you kind of just endorsed it there, that the fees that you get is just a reflection of your own self-worth. And you talked about.
I agree with that. Great.
Our philosophy is we don't. It's called DDWT. We don't work with tossers, and it's a very strict rule that Drew and I had. Again, it's amazing just hearing you say that, Greg, because it.
Yeah. Well, it's a very important. There is a tension, because if you've got no jobs on as a recruiter, and it's the end of the quarter, you're going to take what you can get. I understand that, and we have to be pragmatic. But mostly, you've got to work towards improving the relationship with the client Because once the client learns the quality of service that you can give them, if they work as a partner, they won't go back. They won't go back to the commoditized type arrangement. And so recruiters have to believe that they bring value, and they've got to have the skill to articulate their value. And then, of course, if the client gives you a chance, you've got to deliver. Because if you don't, it's all over Red Rover.
Absolutely, absolutely. So moving on from there, Greg, I know, we talked about how the inconvenience you sometimes have of having to travel abroad on business and fit in sport, and what the nuisance that can be for you, but you've kind of put up with it. But in your early days, when, because I know you moved from South Africa to Australia, then you got promoted to a management job in London at quite an early age. Now, just tell us a bit about that. And, I know you were quite young at the time when I read the book. I remember thinking, wow, it's quite young to be in a management position. Just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I will. It was in London, 14 Great Castle Street, W1, just behind Regent, just behind Oxford Circus, actually. Council personnel, there were 8 of us in a room. And as I mentioned, it was a hurly-burly. There was no interview rooms. We interviewed people behind screens, Terry, and everyone could hear the interview, and anyone in the interview could hear the rest of the room. So it was a broking house. Anyway, when the director came and he wanted to have a private conversation with anybody, there was no place to have that. So he used to have a walk around the block. And one day he came in and he called out my manager, and he took him for a walk up the block, Great Castle Street, Great Portland Street, back down Regent Street. And poor old John, my manager, got fired outside the Wimpy Bar. And he never came back. And I haven't seen him to this day. True story. And then the director came in and he crooked his finger at me and he said, "Savage, walk with me." I'll never forget it. Walk with me, as though we were going for a walk in the Hyde Park. And I thought, this is it. I'm gone, because my results were only moderate. Well, I was made the manager outside the Boots Chemist on the corner there. When I came back, I was the boss, and that was it. And it was a different world. But the lesson and the mistake I made is I thought this, Terry. I thought these 8 people in this room, who were good mates of mine, right? We used to drink around at the George pub around the corner. 2 of them I played rugby with up at Belsize Park Rugby Club. We were good mates. I thought, and this is how naive I was, and you learn, I thought, these are my friends. They will do what I ask them to do. They thought, Greg's the boss. We can do whatever we fucking like, right? So it didn't go well. It didn't go well initially, because I actually took it seriously. And I wanted to do well, and I wanted to learn. And the lesson was, of course, you don't set out to make friends of the people who report to you. They will end up being your friends, and you will be friends with them in most cases. But if you think that you're going to get people to cooperate with you because you're mates, that is not what people look for. What people look for is consistency and clarity and support. And they got lots of friends. They didn't come to their boss for a new friend. In the long run, you'll have lots of friends who report to you. And some of my best friends used to report to me, but I didn't set out to earn their friendship as a management technique, which of course was my mistake in the early days. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
Perfect sense.
Would you say that was your biggest lesson? I mean, how old were you, Greg, when you were in London?
I was 24, maybe getting close to 25. I'd had 2.5 years in Australia as a recruiter. I'd been there for maybe a year. And it was an interesting appointment because, I wasn't the best biller, but I think they probably saw that I was the sort of person who would take it seriously. And maybe that's why I got that job, but it was hard because you still had your own targets to get. And that's where I started to learn the skill of the billing manager. And that's the ability, to put runs on the board. Not that we're going to talk about cricket this particular week, put runs on the board and also coach and develop people around you, which is the hardest job in recruitment, let me tell you. And I've done them all. People say to me, you can't be serious. Surely you were a CEO of a company with 35 branches in 17 countries. Surely that was a harder job. And yeah, it was a very hard job. But when you're the CEO, you dictate what you're going to do with your day. When you're a billing manager, you can literally have a client on the phone giving you an offer, a candidate turning down an offer on the other line, and one of your consultants crying because something went wrong. Deal with that. That's a billing manager's job. And it's one of the hardest jobs in recruitment. And when I went back to Sydney with the same company, I was put in charge of the Sydney office, which was 20 recruiters, and I still had a target myself. And there I learned, you know, that the real secret behind management is in fact coaching. If you are a good coach, if you develop people, if you have the skills to develop people, now coaching's not training, right? Training's good, coaching's better. Coaching's on the job. Coaching's in real time. People learn, I've learned that people learn in the moment of ecstasy or disaster. So when an offer's turned down, that's the time to talk through what could we have said differently, that's when their attention, or when they've just done something really good, that's the time to say, well done, more of that, mate, that's good. Because affirmation and recognition drives behavior as well. And slowly I learned those things. But the other thing that I learned is, you know, you got to do some unpopular things as a manager, and you'll be recognized and promoted and respected in time for the unpopular but right things you did, and won't be remembered at all for the popular inconsequential things you did. And I get stopped in the street by people I don't even recognize, no bullshit, right? And say, God, you annoyed me when you said X, Y, Z and made me. But now I realize how important it was. And now I tell my consultants the same thing. I mean, no one ever came up to me and said, hey, thanks for buying me those donuts on the Friday after back in 1987, you know? Who cares? It's not important. It's the difference you've made. What people really value in leadership is they need to know that their boss cares. And I don't mean cares in a lovey-dovey, hippie commune kind of ganja smoking way. I mean cares about their professional development, A, and B, makes a difference in their life. And the coaching and the support when they're down, and funny enough, the little kick in the ass when it's required. I call it tough empathy. You know, what I like to say, it's a bit, you shouldn't say this. You definitely shouldn't say what I'm saying. But sometimes managing is a bit like the way you need to deal with children, because you can't always give people what they want. Sometimes they have to get what they need. And tough empathy is when you give somebody what they need, which might be, mate, look, I know you've got the biggest billing in the office, but you're behaving like a bit of a twat. You've got to stop speaking to people like this. Now, for example, or you've got to do your administration, whatever it might be. Now, a lot of managers don't do that because they fear the big bill is going to walk out.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you don't do that, your own credibility is shot, because people won't trust you if they can see that, hey, around here, the rules are we treat everyone with respect. Except for Terry, he's a big biller, he can do whatever he likes. That's not a way to manage a business. So those are some of the lessons. I made all these mistakes, by the way. I did all these things. But I learned over time that those are the things people will value. They'll value clarity, and by that I mean they know, you know, if I go to some of my clients, I say, hey, if I got all your recruiters into this room one by one and I asked them what good looks like, would they all say the same thing? If I asked them to say, what are our differentiators in this business, would they all say the same thing? You know, is the ethos consistent? And a great leader, a manager will bring clarity. And the big one is this, which is missing in all recruitment, not all, most recruitment companies, probably most businesses, guys, is that, you know, people have KPIs, they have goals, they have behavior standards, but there is a lack of two things, and they're the hardest things as a manager. One is accountability, and the second is consequences. If you're going to say to people, hey, around here, we do 3 client visits a week, and you don't, and no one ever mentions it, it's a slippery slope. Because what that means is, I'll do it if I feel like it. You need to have accountability, which is, of course, the confrontational part. Yeah. And I'm not talking about bullying. I'm not talking about micromanaging. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about, hey, and it's two-way. As the manager, if you say, hey, next week I'll come out with 2 client visits with you to give you a hand, you've got to do it. You've got to be accountable. That is the ethos and the culture of great businesses and sporting teams, for that matter. I've played in a few sporting teams, always the worst player on the team, but you always found that in those teams, people were accountable. And after the game, if a guy made a really stupid mistake, it was discussed. And what should we have done differently? Not in a punitive way, but in a learning way. And it could be punitive if the guy was told, you know, don't break around the blind side 20 times in the game, and he did it, then the coach is going to say, mate, you dropped. There's a consequence because I told you not to do that, and you lost us the game. And, people learn when there's consequences for not following through. So those are some of my lessons that I've learned, guys.
Again, really good points. 100% agree. Just going back to consequences, and the point you made there is that a lot of the time the owner or the manager gets unprepared to give consequences, unprepared to do the unpopular things because they're scared of losing the top biller. What I've found is that one of the reasons they have that fear is because the hiring side or replacing that top biller is so difficult. So again, over the years, you must have sort of been in charge of hiring, building teams. What are some of the mistakes you've made in that area?
Yeah, it's a good question, Drew, and I will enlarge on that. Just going back to the big biller, what I call the prima donna.
Yeah.
The risk of losing the big biller. First of all, it's unlikely if it's handled properly, and if you nip it in the bud early, that's the thing where people get it wrong. You've got to say to the big biller who comes late to 3 meetings in a row. You call him aside, you have a coffee, and you say, "Mate, you're making life difficult for me because we've got a thing around here, as you know. We start our meetings on time. You come late. You're important here, mate. Don't let me down. I need your help." So you'd start like that. You'd make it easy for the guy to get back on board. But if he doesn't, if he or she doesn't, and their behavior becomes destructive and debilitating for everyone else, you have to deal with it, because the danger of the big biller leaving is not as bad as everyone else losing faith in the business. I like to say fees don't beat ethos. If you're going to build a business that has a true ethos, like we behave like this, you can't compromise on that, because otherwise they'll leave anyway because they won't believe in you. So in the long run. So fees don't beat ethos, mate. The short-term fees. I've got a big bill I'm worried about. Meantime, your business is crumbling around you, and everyone thinks you're a weak, and they know you're a hypocrite because you tell them they've got to behave like that, but not Betty. She can do what she likes because she bills so much. So she doesn't do the things, but you let her go. So that is the beginning of the end. Let me tell you my biggest hiring cock up. I know I've made a stack, but one of them was we've been running Recruitment Solutions for 3 years, and we're going really well. And it was up to like $13 million turnover, and we had about 30 staff, and it was a golden run. A recession came next. I'll talk about that later. And a woman called Julia Ross came to see me, and she was a recruiter for Alfred Marks. Do any of you remember that business back in the day?
Yeah.
Anyway, she came to see me, and we were accounting recruiters, and she was a good recruiter, but she was in business support, or secretarial, can you believe it? We called it in those days. And she said, "Greg, you've got this nice accounting business. Hire me, and I will build business support off the back of all your accounting clients." And I liked her. I thought she was good, but there were 2 other owners. I ran and she met with them, and they said, "Yes, she's good. We should take this chance." And I said, "No, she's not up to it." Anyway, we didn't hire her. Get this. Julia Ross went and started her own business. It eventually ended up doing $250 million in revenue and became one of Australia's biggest publicly listed companies. And so, good on you, Greg. Good judge of character. Well done. And for 30 years, I'd see Julia Ross and I'd smile, and she wouldn't rub it in, and we were good mates. But she sold that business to, I don't remember now, some big company. So I think some of the other lessons is this. Drew, you said a lot of the owners say, "Hey, it's hard to find good recruiters." And I know that. It's the same everywhere I go in the world. All my board meetings starts with, how do we hire people? But the thing that I find is when I say to the owner, "What are you doing about it?" they tend to say, "Well, we're running ads, we're going to Rex, and we've asked our consultants for referrals." The 3 least effective, or at least undifferentiated things you can do. Here's the secret. It's not a secret, it's just a fact. If, as every manager and owner of recruitment company says, that hiring people is my most important thing, if I could hire the right people, I could drive my business forward. Why do we only try and hire people when we've had a resignation? Mary resigns. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Quick, Rex, put ads on the thing and all that. You've got to be recruiting even if you're not hiring. And so my message is, I call it 100 cups of coffee. And I say to the owner of a recruitment company, if hiring is so important to you, you need to have 100 cups of coffee a year with potential recruits. They say, you must be joking. I say, no, it's 2 cups of coffee a week. That's 60 minutes. You say it's the most important thing. So you should be approaching people and saying, hey, look, I know you work for another recruiter. We're not actually hiring at the moment, but we are growing the best accounting recruiter in Woking. And let's have a coffee just to see if we're on the same page. You typically get a yes because you're not actually headhunting them. You have a coffee and in 5 minutes you say to yourself, I'll never hire this person. Then it's all over. But you have a great chat and you agree to meet in 6 months and you get your staff to refer people and you run ads and you do rec to rec. But you do all that even if you're not hiring. You're having 100 cups of coffee a year and you have a calendar reminder to say, I'm going to contact that person in 6 months. And you should get help from your admin staff, doesn't matter. But you need to be interviewing 100 people a year. And then when you get that resignation, you've actually got 5, 6 good people in the pipe that you can talk to.
Yeah.
And it's hard, you know, people say to me, that's hard work. And I say, well, mate, if it wasn't hard work, all the stupid and lazy people would be rich. And they're not, because it's hard work to do anything well. And to run a successful recruitment business in this environment is hard work. And if you're making your staff recruiting, your own staff reactive, you will always get the drinks. And that's what people don't seem to understand. You've got to be proactive and always recruit. As I say, always be recruiting, even if you're not hiring. Because the one thing you know for sure, guys, as an owner of a recruitment company, is you're going to need another recruiter sometime soon. All right. It's going to be coming up either through growth or through a defection, somebody leaving. People leave for 1,000 reasons, but you're going to need somebody. So why aren't we recruiting ahead of the curve? So that's the big one, Drew, that I think could make a difference if people can do that one.
Yeah, Greg, I mean, Drew and I, we work with owners and directors of only the independent recruitment search business owners, and we share with them how to make more placements at the right fee with fewer headaches. And whenever we talk to recruitment search firm owners, the question we always ask is, you know, what's your number one challenge in your business right now? You can almost guarantee it will be one or a combination of these things: time, team, and money. So the challenge there is about lack of time, the team. So it's around team. It's either underperforming team, or they want to build their team, and money often is around business generation or cash flow or something like that, but often about winning clients and so on.
Yeah.
Experience.
If you break those things down, you know, time is usually code for poor management, actually. So, you know, if you're a recruiter running a 10-person company and you're wondering not a recruiter, an owner running a 10-person company, and you're wondering why you've got no time and you can never get to 15. Because getting a recruitment business to 15 people, I call it the valley of death. So few recruitment companies can do that. You guys would know that. 80% of recruitment companies in your country and mine have less than 10 staff. And mostly because the manager doesn't have the ability to build a structure that is sustainable. And that means building a second tier of management. And you know, they will never get beyond that. Or they hire 15 people and it all turns to chaos and, you know, it turns to pudding and 5 people resign, they're back to 10 again. And they can't ever get that kind of critical mass that takes them to the next level. And so often it means the manager doing things differently and giving responsibilities to other people. If they hold on to all the reins, they can't rise above a certain size. Does that make sense in the experience you've had?
Yeah, very much so. So in terms of those challenges, you brought a good point there about 80% of recruitment search owners never get above 10, and I was aware of that figure. What would be your response be to owners with those 3 challenges? Because it is around time, it is around team, and it is around winning business. Kind of asking a lot here in this podcast, but we're going to people listening to this have got those 3 challenges. What would your response be to those guys? They say, Greg, these are my challenges: time, team, and new business or money. Okay,
well, we'll try and tackle them one by one. So, I mean, obviously time covers a multitude of sins, and for each person it could be a different problem, but mostly because I've had these conversations, I've run businesses with people doing all these sorts of things, and we all have the same issues. When it comes to time, the first thing is This is going to sound sacrilegious, and most people listening to this as owners will not like it, but it's true. The owner has to work out whether they are doing the right job in their own business. One of the biggest impediments to growth is the owner stays in the job that they're not the best at. And the owner doesn't have to be the general manager. One of the most difficult conversations I had was with an owner of a recruitment company where he couldn't get beyond 12 or 15 people because he was a great recruiter and a god-awful manager. But in his mind, he had to be the manager because it was his business. And I, after a few conversations, encouraged him, and we moved him to the side, and he was still the director and the owner, but he was the chief sales guy. We gave him an offsider, and they built $1 million between them. We hired a general manager to run the business, and that business has now got 25 staff. And the owner has never been happier. So and he's got lots of time. He goes to the gym at lunchtime, and he's billing $1 million, literally.
Yeah.
And the manager, he's a very good people manager and a coach and a performance manager, and that's working really, really well. And staff turnover has gone down. So the first thing about time is make sure you're doing the right job. The second thing is you got to, even if you are doing the right job, you've got to build a second tier of management. If you're going to grow the business beyond 10, you've got to have a second tier of management, break the team into pods of 3 or 4 people with a billing manager, and so it can grow. And the third part, if you get it right down to the consultant level, which inevitably bubbles up to the manager, is you've got to teach people. I mean, one of the biggest crimes and sins and disasters in our industry, and it's so endemic that we don't even realize it, or most recruiters don't, is that we only get paid for a tiny fraction of the work we do. So unless you're a search consultant, most recruiters in this country fill 1 job out of 4. I'm sure it's the same in the UK, which if you fill 1 job out of 4, that by definition means you're failing 75% of the time. It also means you're not getting paid 75% of the time. So the biggest switch that a recruitment owner could flick, I should say, is to coach people to sell exclusivity, to improve their partnerships. And a recruitment company that's filling 1 job out of 4, that switches that ratio to 1 out of 3, the world will change. Yeah. Because if it's a company of any size, it can add as much as $1 million to the bottom line for no more work and no more staff. And of course, you wouldn't be worrying about, so these are some of the things. None of them are particularly new, but these are some of the ways that I would deal with time. The other thing, I just make one other comment, is a lot of owners of recruitment companies resisting technology. And they're resisting it for a couple of reasons. One is the old ways were the best, which is half true, but definitely half not true. And the second reason is there's so much technology, I can't understand it all. I'll just keep going with what I've got. What we've got to do to save time is use the best technology and automate as much of the job as we can. Don't fight it. I even had a recruiter, the owner the other day, saying to me that he's trying to get his consultants to do what technology can do better than the technology. That is just young. Automate the drudgery. Automate the hack work. Free your recruiters up to do the sorts of things you and I were talking about, Drew, like getting in front of a client, selling exclusivity, partnering, hunting out candidates that can't be found on job boards. That's the value. That's the value of a recruiter, and that's the value going forward. And the owner must lead that charge. My message is this, and I know that I'm not giving you guys much of a chance, so I'll stop for a breath. Owners of recruitment companies should disrupt their own businesses now before something else comes along and disrupts it for them in a very painful way.
100% agree with everything you said there. One thing I wanted to add is, like, I've found that a lot of recruitment search runners get frightened by this idea of automation and thinking that it's going to take away from the sort of personal interactions they have with clients. But what we're saying is you automate, as Greg said, the drudgery, and that automation can be done with either technology or people. Like, one of the most frightening things that I see is that an owner will come to us and they're doing basic admin tasks, spending hours on basic admin tasks that they could get potentially a low-level employee to do for them, so they can spend more time on the high-value tasks. So again, one of the quotes that Terry said a few months back, if you don't have the right admin support, you don't have very good admin support, you are the admin support. And quite frankly, you're doing tasks that are below your pay grade. So automate as much as the process as you can, either with technology or with the right people.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And there's quite a lot of people who are senior in recruitment who hang on to things because they've always done them and because they think they can do it better than their staff. Here's the big message to those guys and women. Just because you can do something better than your staff member is not a reason to do it. You need to give it to them, train them, and make them better than you at doing that while you move on to something that they can't do, like sell a retainer or coach a recruiter or win business. So you're absolutely right. I'll tell you a quick story. I'll even tell you who it was, because I'm on the board and I'm the founder of this company. People to People. I don't work there. I've never worked there, but it's $100 million business now. And they introduced a chatbot. You can go and look at it. People to People, the number 2 people. 8 offices around Australia. Fabulous business. They introduced a chatbot because they've got 100 consultants, and these guys were screening like 1,000 people a week. I might have my numbers wrong, but it was something like this. They introduced a chatbot. Here's the interesting thing, guys. They gave the candidates, or they give the candidates who come to their job, to their website, the choice of speaking to a human being or speaking to the chatbot first. The most of them choose that chatbot. How about that?
Yeah.
And the chatbot will tell them things about the job, screen them a little bit, and then put them through to the right consultant. Anyway, I was in a board meeting and the CEO, a good friend of mine, I hired him into recruitment when he was 23, he now owns this business, pretty much. He said, good news. Our chatbot has reduced the number of screening calls our consultants are taking from 1,000 a week to 250. We are saving 300 hours a week in consultant time. And everyone cheered. And I spoiled the mood terribly by saying, what are the consultants doing with the extra 300 hours?
Yeah.
And everyone looked at me. And of course, it was a good question because they immediately got on to, right, what are we going to do? Because my argument was, let them speak to candidates more. Let them go out in front of clients more. Let them do something that the automation can't do, because that's the value. It's not the saving of the 300. It's what you can do with the time.
100%.
That's the value.
Yeah. And what you said earlier about, 25% success rate on contingent recruiters, which in fact, I would challenge you on that, say it's, in our experience, it's more like 15 to 20%, but it doesn't matter. But in your book, you mentioned that one company, apologies, I can't remember if it was your company or somebody else, where they stopped taking contingent roles and they would only take exclusive and retained roles, but their fill rate, actually, can you just remind me of that particular story, please?
Yeah, okay. That was Aquint. I was the CEO of International. Aquint's an American marketing recruitment company and marketing and digital creative stuff. I was the international CEO, which means all their business outside of America, which was a small part of their business. But in Australia, we had 5 offices, 6 offices, still exists. Aquint's doing very well. We had 6 offices, great company. If you read the chapter in my book about Aquint, you'll see my views on them. But one of the things we did was, now, before I go into this, let me first of all just make the point. I wasn't as brave as I sound because 75% of our GP came from contract and temp. But we did have a substantial permanent business. It was doing $500,000-$600,000 in fees a month. And we were filling one job out of 4 or 5, as you quite rightly said, Terry, and I was sick of it. And we just made the decision that we would only take jobs exclusively. And let me tell you, I almost had a riot on my hands with the consultants, right? Because their view was, you're taking business away from me. And I had to do my best ever communication job to say, no, you will fill more jobs. It's better you work on 6 jobs and fill 5 than work on 20 jobs and fill 2, right? And it's exactly what happened. We had some problems, a couple of consultants left. This was a difficult thing to do because it was blanket. You had to get it exclusively. And if a client said, hey, but I've dealt with you for years, you had to go down and sell it to them. Some didn't come across. But what we found was we worked on less orders, but our fees went up because we filled a higher percentage of them. And it was just such a telling thing. And it only went on for a year until the Lehman Brothers 2008. You remember what happened at the end of 2008 to 2009? There was a big recession in the UK. It was a nightmare. Same here. I had a business in the UK, in London as well, so I know all about how tough it was. And that put the kibosh on that because we had to basically take any job we could get after that. But it was very successful in a good market, putting your efforts to where the returns are.
Yeah, and on that, you just touched on something I wanted to ask you about. You talk about recessions. How many recessions have you personally traded through, Greg?
Well, it was the Great Depression of 1929 was a big one for me, Terry. I know that's what your question meant. There's been, I would say, 3 significant that I would class as technically recessions, a lot of downturns. I'll tell you a quick story about recession, and it's quite a few years ago, but I beg your listeners to take heed, because I can tell you something right now. We are going to have a recession. It's going to be deep, but I don't know when. It's going to happen. And it's been so long since we've really had one, that there are plenty of people who've got no idea how to prepare for it. And here's a question. You could do this, you two guys, as you talk to your clients. You should say this to your clients, your owners. What would happen to your company if your permanent revenue dropped 50%, GP this is, gross profit, net fee income, whatever you call it, margin? What would happen if your gross profit permanent dropped 50% and your temporary gross profit dropped 25% in 1 month, and it didn't recover for 2 years? And they look at you and go, well, why are you coming up with that fantasy? That's not a fantasy. That's what will happen in a severe downturn. It has happened several times before, even worse. In 1992, Recruitment Solutions was turning over about 14 million. We were going great. 1991. Australia went into a massive recession. So did the end of the world, the rest of the world, but it felt like the end of the world. And what happened was we were handling about 220 permanent jobs. I talk about this in the book, Terry. 220 jobs at one time. It dropped to 18 jobs, and it never got above 40 for 2 years. And the things that kept 60% of recruitment companies in Australia went bust in the next year. 60%. It was an absolute bloodbath. Now, here are the things that kept us alive. Number one, we had a substantial, strong, high-margin temporary business. And the temporary business dropped 25%, but 6 months later began to recover as clients realized, hey, we've got to get on with business, but let's not hire a permanent person. And so I say to all your listeners, 60% of your gross profit should be contract and temporary. Learn to love temporary. If your business is all permanent, I know you're making a lot of money. I know you're making a lot of money, but when the market collapses, you will collapse because it will drop so far. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we had no debt. We didn't have any debt, and as a result, we didn't have to pay big interest payments. And I've had a lot of arguments with owners over the years who say to me, oh, look at my balance sheet. It's a lazy balance sheet. We should borrow money. And a lot of people are much smarter than me have said, you're a fool, Greg. You should always live on somebody else's money. A lot of them have now gone into liquidation, of course. So maybe I'm not such a fool. Of course, you need to borrow money when you need to borrow money. And you need to do it smartly and take advantage of opportunities. But living off deep debt, which you can't service when your revenues drop, is good night, switch out the lights. Yeah. I've even seen companies whose cash flow is so bad that their P&L shows a profit, their balance sheet shows no cash. So you know what they do? They borrow money to pay a dividend. You know, so we can talk about directors' mistakes in a moment, but the other thing about the recession is we cut our expenses fast and deep. I can tell you now what's going to happen if we have a downturn. All the inexperienced guys are going to go, oh, this is just a blip. So let's let Becky go and let's change the beer from Asahi to VB, you know, that'll save 20 cents a bottle, and that's our cost cutting. And then, of course, next month, the revenues drop further. Oh, dear, let's now fire Sam. And then the next month, it's death by 1,000 cuts. When you see that it's going to be sustained, and when you take an informed view and you go, this is not going to bounce back, then you cut deep. And it's very painful. But actually, it's better for morale, because once it's done, you can honestly say to people, that's it. We have no more plans. It's us. We're going forward. We're lean. We've closed an office. We've let some people go. We are very sorry about that. We're not happy. But, you know, we wouldn't survive if we did. And when Recruitment Solutions had that recession, our staff dropped from 75 to 30. We closed 3 of our offices. But we traded through the recession. And when we came out the other side, we grew so fast that 5 years later, we listed on the Australian Stock Exchange at a value of $60 million. And we were this close to going bust. And years later with Aquent, which is now the Lehman Brothers period, 2009, I had been working with that business for 8 years, and we'd grown it from 5 million. This is all in the book, and I got the audited accounts from Aquent signed off on it because it's such a great story. The business grew from 5 million to 100 million. The profit grew from nothing to 9 million. I began to think I could do no wrong, began to believe my own PR. Then Lehman Brothers, the year later, our revenue dropped, get this, $50 million in 1 year. $50 million in 1 year. We went from a 9 million profit to a 7 million loss. I'm at liberty to say this because I got Aquent's permission to tell the story. It was only a small part of their business, and we were doing better than everybody else. We bounced back and we thrived and we did okay. But it was I got a slap across the chops because I realized my technology wasn't good enough. My managers weren't good. I had a lot of little managers who weren't really selling. A lot of the recruiters were really lovely people, but were really just processors of assignments, couldn't win business.
Yeah.
And I was ill-equipped. And so I would say that now is the time, always is the time, to be taking advantage of growth and opportunity. But just asking yourself the question, just say, our revenue dropped 50% in perm and 25 in temp.
Yeah.
You know, let's do a P&L on what that would look like. And so it breaks my heart when I see people in a good time do stupid things, which is like, for example, taking 2 floors of the most expensive building in town with views of Sydney Harbour or the Thames or whatever, marble bloody entry. Nobody cares, mate. Well, that's going to send you bust when the downturn comes. So you've got to have your fixed costs under control, be able to pull back your variable costs, and have recruiters who can work through tough times. So there's my recession lecture, and I'm passionate about it because I feel it's coming. I don't know when, and I don't want it, but I feel it's coming.
Again, 100% agree with everything you said there. One thing that I do want to add is if you're listening to this now and you're reliant on, you're doing well, but you're reliant on one or few clients, get more clients, because all it takes is one of those clients to pull the plug and you're fucked. Like, just get better.
Seen that so many times.
Yeah. And it's like, it almost frightens me. Like, you speak to so many recruiters who are doing really well, like good revenue, good profits, but you look closer at their business and it's actually, they're doing well because of one client. They're doing well because of 1, 2 clients. And those clients can pull the plug any minute and then your business is swept from under your feet. And that can happen in a recession or not. But
it can happen anytime. A change of CEO or anything could happen. And I agree with you. I like to say that no one client should give you more than 10% of your gross profit. And I see some with 30%. That's one thing. The other thing is, don't allow your debtors days to blow up. You need to collect your debts in 30 days. I see people be getting squeezed on margin on their temporary business and allowing their clients to. We're acting as a free bank to our clients. It's a ridiculous scenario. The other thing is a link from what you said there, Drew, about not having all your business with 1 or 2 clients or a big chunk. It's the same with your recruiters. So I often see a team, a smaller company, there's 8 recruiters, and they're doing quite nicely, making a nice profit. But when you dig into it, there's 2 recruiters doing 50% of the billing. And the other 6 make up the rest. And then a downturn comes or something happens and the 2 recruiters leave and there is actually no substance. And the other thing that I think is just linked to this is you've got to work out as a recruiter who actually owns the client relationships. You can sometimes see some quite big billing recruiters, but they're being fed through a PSL. I think you call it in your country, we call it PSAs, or they're being fed in some way. And when the going gets tough, they don't actually have the ability to deal with the client. They're good at making the match, but they can't actually do that. So these are all ways to check the sustainability and resilience of your business, which I think you should always be doing. But right now, I just feel, and I don't want to, I've got no idea. Who the hell am I? I've got no idea to say there's a recession coming. But it's been 10 years since the last one, and that in itself makes me a little bit hedgy.
Yeah. And just going back to something you said there, again, we keep saying this, but we do agree with everything you're saying. I think the other lesson is, often we talk to recruitment search firm owners, and they're just about to bring in a new consultant, and they say things like, yeah, this guy, regardless of genders, built 200, 300,000 last year. And again, if you look closely at that, they had 1 or 2 clients who, you rightly said there, Greg, who were feeding them all that business. They then joined this new firm, and their billings, quite frankly, are crap, all because they've
lost that client.
To do it. But on paper, it looked like they were billing 200,000 to 300,000 a year. But it was built on nothing, absolutely nothing. We see that quite often, actually.
I see that all the time. In fact, I have come to learn that mostly the superstars you hire from elsewhere vastly underperform when you get them in there. And the main reason for that is sometimes they've lied and you haven't done your due diligence. By the way, I can talk to you about that as well, going back to the hiring. And sometimes, more often, they overestimate the number of clients they're going to come across with them. Yeah. And they're not nearly as good as they thought they were. And people, isn't it just a thing about good recruiters? It's not all of them, but most of them. They vastly overemphasize their contribution to the results and underemphasize the team and the company and the brand and the technology and all the other things. And so they change, and wow, they're not as good as they thought. By the way, on the due diligence thing, get this, right? So you read my book, and you know that I've run all these businesses 40 years. I know it doesn't look like it, but thousands of recruiters I've worked with. How many reference checks do you think I've been asked to give on people who've worked for me in the last 7 or 8 years? How many? How many people have contacted?
I would imagine you must get 3 or 4 a day, every day.
I've had 3 in total.
3?
Wow.
It is the most incredible thing. And, I'm not hard to find, right? I mean, on social media. And I will always give the time of day and give a proper reference. And I've had 3 in 5 years. And I've seen people, because you watch on LinkedIn, and I've seen people get hired by people I know, and I've said to myself, that'll last 3 months. And I've met people, and I've been right. And I've met people in the street who've said to me, I went for an interview with someone and they didn't get the job. And if they just called me, I would have said, hire that person, or don't hire that person, and explained why. And it is incredible to me how little due diligence people do with their hiring. And especially when it's me, because I'm so easy to find, and I'm going to give them the truth. It's the most astounding flaw in our own hiring
we have
an industry.
Yeah, we have a thing called Elite, where we meet with a group of recruiters every 12 weeks, and I won't give the owner's name, so we'll call him Nigel. Drew knows exactly what I meant, but he went to bring in, I think it was 2 consultants, and he sat in the room just talking about, I'm bringing in these 2 guys, and he gave the name of 2 consultants he's bringing in, and there was somebody else in the room. As he was talking, just looked them up on LinkedIn. That's all they did. They simply, on their phone, very quickly looked them up. And he called them out. He called them out in the room. He said, you realise these 2 guys have no recruitment experience? No, just going with it. Not according to their CV. And our client Jim said, well, according to LinkedIn, they have no recruitment experience. Now, Nigel couldn't even be bothered to did some due diligence on social media just to verify what they actually said in their CV or resume. But it never ceases to amaze us, that sort of thing. And this is from recruiters as well, which, I don't know, for some bizarre reason.
It is astounding. It is astounding. And so one of the things, I've worked and of course I made a lot of mistakes like this, but I've got rigid on due diligence. And, because the pain of a wrong hire, the cost, the disruption, it's worth putting the effort in the screening and selection stage to get it right, because that's how you build your business. I mean, these are obvious things I'm saying, but it is shocking. And I talk about it a lot in the book. I think I told the story. I'd got one of those reference checks came only a year or so ago. One of my senior guys had worked with me for 10 years. And it was by an international recruitment company. Everyone would know them. And the woman who contacted me had been meticulously professional. She set up the time. She warned me about everything. And she called me and she started asking me questions. And halfway through or earlier, I said, tell me, what is the job that Stephen's going for? And what are your expectations of it? And she completely lost her composure. And then she said, look, I'm sorry, I'll be honest with you. I've never met him. I don't know what his job is. I'm just taking the reference check. And it just occurred to me, what a wasted opportunity, because that guy, Stephen, had worked for me as a recruiter. He'd worked for me as a manager, and he'd been a brilliant business development sales guy. Now, I would have given 3 different references on him, depending on what job they were hiring him for, and I would have given them guidance on how to get the best out of it. She didn't know. So what that meant was that the reference check was just compliance.
Yeah.
It wasn't part of the assessment. And the reference check is the assessment, it's not the compliance. I mean, the compliance is secondary. Of course, she wanted to know he'd worked there as he said he did, and what was his salary, and was he a nice bloke, and I gave all that. But if she said, is he a good manager of people in a downturn, I could have given her some really good insight. She didn't ask, because she didn't know what the job was. Crazy. That's a giant recruitment company.
Yeah.
Well known.
Yeah, and let's be clear, Drew and I have made mistakes, and one of the things that I enjoyed about your book was your brutal honesty, Greg. You shared your successes, and you shared where you dropped some clangers, and we all have as business owners. As you became as you became more senior in these roles, did your mistakes become less frequent?
I just think I learned a whole new way to make mistakes, because you see, I didn't make the mistakes that I'd made before as often, although there were plenty that I repeated. But I think I was now making mistakes because the job had changed. So as a director and an owner, and as the business became bigger, you need to understand, for example, the difference between revenue and profit and cash, and how to manage the business that way. I'm stunned at how many owners of recruitment companies actually do not truly understand the difference between revenue and gross profit. They don't. And they certainly don't understand the difference between a P&L and a balance sheet. Now, I'm not being demeaning here, because I'm not an accounting person and I struggled initially as well, but you've got to learn it. You've got to understand that a P&L is a snapshot in time, and it's still a fantasy. It says you've made a big profit, but unless you've got the cash, you can't pay your bills with a P&L. You pay your bills with cash. And so I learned about cash, and I learned about debtors, and I learned about low margin, high volume business, and how if you lose a little bit of money on one deal, just by having lots of those deals doesn't make up the difference. It just means you lose a lot of money. And so the deals being done, the ego deals, where, hey, we've got to take on this PSL, we've won it. I said, what's good about it? It's $6 million in revenue. Look at the margins, but the revenue, but look at the margins. You're going to have expensive consultants on that. But the revenue, Greg, it's going to take us to but look at the fucking margins, mate. And you're going to lose money. So now what you're doing, you're taking on this PSL and you've increased your risk. You've increased your staff to run it. You've increased your debt so that you've now got an overdraft. Meantime, your client is sitting there having a lovely time while you're funding his growth. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Again, ridiculous, but you see it so often. And the amount of times that you speak to a recruitment business owner, and I think there's a lot of ego involved in revenue as well. I think people like to say how much revenue they've generated. The amount of times that we've met owners who are maybe doing 7 figures, and it seems from the outside doing really well. Okay, great. And then you meet someone who's doing 300,000 a year, but then you look at it closely, and the 300,000 a year business is more profitable than a 7-figure business. You need to. I think there's a lot of ego when people chase the revenue, and what they really should be chasing is the profit. But even in addition to that, cash in the bank account. Cash in the bank.
Right.
Most people have got a story where, at the end of the year, they've met with their accountant, and the accountant said, "Oh, you've done this much profit this year," and then you sort of sit there thinking, "Well, where is it?"
So, Drew, if you read my book, there's 2 stories in there. And again, I've got permission. One of my clients, Precision Sourcing, they were growing exponentially when I came onto their board, and every year they grew, they made less money. and it didn't take me long to see what they truly knew in their hearts is the New South Wales government, which was their biggest client. The margins were 8% on temp. And my advice was, we're going to fire the New South Wales government. And they said, but our revenue will go from 35 million to 20. I said, yeah, but your profit's going to go from nothing to $1 million. Which would you prefer? And so we did. And exactly what happened. And another one was with People to People, my own company. I was only a director. But we we didn't renew our contract with Optus. It was $50 million of payrolling revenue, but only about 300,000 or 400,000 of margin. Wow. And, it just wasn't worth it. And as soon as we got rid of them, the stress and the profit, the stress went down, the profit went up. Again, that's in the book. So I am, I suppose, proud that I've been able to tell the stories. And you've read the book and you'll know that some of the stories don't reflect that well on me, Terry, because I made mistakes and did some stupid things. I did some arrogant things. And some of them at that sort of level include things like geographic expansion. Again, you said, Drew, ego in relation to revenue, 100%, but also ego in relation to opening branches, what I call dots on the map. And sometimes, I see it in Australia a lot. Let's open an office in Adelaide, Perth. It can be a good idea, but why have 4 people battling to break even in Adelaide and absorbing management time when we could hire 4 people in Sydney under our umbrella and make a fortune out of it, It's just got to be thought through carefully. And I've made those mistakes. and I've made a lot of mistakes around acquisitions because I've executed 15 or more acquisitions. And I don't think we can talk about it on this podcast because that's a whole thing on its own. Big lesson to be learned there. The other big mistake I think we make is long-term acceptance of serial mediocrity of recruiters. And you shouldn't talk about people like that. They're not mediocre. They're not mediocre human beings. They might be brilliant human beings, but I have a lot of managers and owners who say, "Oh, I bet he's not a very good recruiter, but I only pay her 80,000 a year, and she billed 150, so I'm making a profit on it." Well, you're not, mate. You're not making a profit, and the opportunity cost of having somebody on 80, absorbing another 80 in on costs, and a lot of management time, instead of having a person who is at least returning 3 times their salary, is huge. But if you go into the average recruitment company, they will have a couple of big billers, a couple on the way out or on the way in, and a vast rump of mediocre people. And if they can get those mediocre people up to good, the drop through to the bottom line is exponential. And that is a free tip for anyone who wants to make money out of recruitment. Focus on the middle group.
Sorry, you go on.
I was going to say just very quickly, it's important to understand that sometimes simply not spending the money is more profitable than spending and getting a crap return. Does that make sense?
That's true. I mean, you can look at it clinically, like this person's billing X and we're paying them Y and we're not making money. But you've got to also remember the 2 other things. The management time that person absorbs. Often we put a lot more time into the underperformer than the good performer. And the upside of a good performer to great. I mean, in my sort of money, if you can take someone from 300,000 a year billing when you're paying them 80 to 400,000, I mean, they'll earn an extra 20 or 25 in commission, and good. I love paying those sorts of commission checks. But the other 60 is profit. Yeah. And that's just a massive, massive difference to the business. So you're right about that. You've got to really look at those sorts of things. And I've made those mistakes time and time again. I mean, probably still am a little bit because it's not easy. You know, we're human beings. We misjudge people. We want people to do well. We don't like it when people fail. And sometimes the nicest person, the one we love the most having around, is actually the underperformer, which makes it even harder.
Yeah. So true. So true. And there's I'm sure you're well aware of the 80-20 principle. And any organization, any recruitment search firm that's got a team, 20% of that team are the performers. 20% of recruiters, recruitment firms have 80% of the business worldwide. And you've made some really good points there, Greg. And it's just being aware of that number, and you as well, Drew, about the vanity, because a lot of those numbers are vanity. And the amount of times we talk to recruitment business owners, and we say, "How are you doing?" And they will tell us about how many people they employ, which, quite frankly, is irrelevant. You could have 1,000 people there. So we get things like this. Yeah, we employ 10 consultants. Fantastic. And they're doing like 800,000. This is UK sterling. They're actually making a loss. And then they say this is what we always get. Yeah, but 4 or 5 of those guys have only been with us for 6 or 9 months. Now, you must say that every day of the week, Craig. They then justify those figures. And it is about vanity. And I think ultimately what we all need to remember as business owners that we're in business to make money. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's what we're here for. We're in business to make money.
We're in business to make, the thing about making money and making a profit, I've got a very clear philosophy on it. You need to make a profit because profit's like oxygen. You know, like you and I, you 2 guys and me, we didn't wake up this morning saying, "Hey, where's my oxygen?" But if we didn't have it, we would have noticed that, right? So that's profit. You know, you need it because you can't do all the other good things in life without oxygen. You can't go for a run, have a meal, watch a sports game, hug your children. You can't do it. And you can't do the things in business that are good, like hiring people, training people, installing technology, growing the business without profit. So profit is a wonderful thing. It's not at all costs and not $1 extra and screw everyone, not that, but profit is critical. And for those business owners, unless they build a sustainable business that is consistently profitable, they don't have choice in their lives. And I often say this to owners. The thing about success in business is it gives you choice. It's not about buying a better car. You know, how many steaks can you eat? How many cars can you drive? You don't need that. What you need is choice. And if you're running a successful business that is profitable and sustainably so, then you can sell it. Or you can say, I'm loving this. I'm going to grow it right across the UK and I'm going to expand into Asia or whatever. Or you can put a manager in there and work 3 days a week and go and work in a charity if that's what you want to do. It gives you choice, but most of them are tied to doing exactly the same thing. And they're going to be very sad when they want to close their business and sell it, because most of them don't realize how little value their businesses have because they haven't made them sustainable and consistently profitable. And that's the truth.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah, some real great stuff there, Greg. Honestly, I've got so many more questions to ask you, but we're running out of time. What I'm going to suggest, Greg, is
mate, we're going to be going for an hour and a half, mate. No one's going to listen to this.
I'd like to arrange another interview just to talk about acquisitions, because that in itself is another subject that I know our guys will find really interesting. Before we sort of wrap up, Drew, is there anything else you want to ask Greg on this?
Yeah, so just one last question. Two last questions. Where's the website we can get the book? What's the website?
Okay, thank you for that, because that's important. It's called The Savage Truth, Lessons in Business, Life and Leadership from 40 Years in Recruitment. My website is gregsavage.com.au, gregsavage.com.au. To go to that website, there's a pop-up that takes you to the book, and there's a tab that takes you to the book. The book will be delivered in late October, but can be purchased now at a discount. I encourage you to do that so you can be amongst the first to get it. There's 4 ways you can buy it on that website, 4 platforms like Amazon, etc. The best one, I think, for the UK is Book Depository. The best one for Australia is Booktopia.
What about you?
In the US, I think it's Amazon. The problem with Amazon, if you're in the UK, is because they haven't actually got the book, because it's still, being typeset. They won't send it to outside America. They won't sell it outside America. Once they've got the book, they'll sell it worldwide.
Okay. And Greg, can you spell your name for the listeners, please? For your website.
Greg, it's www.greg, G-R-E-G-S-A-V-A-G-E, gregsavage.com.au. Don't forget the AU, gregsavage.com.au. You'll see the book there. I'd love you to buy it. You know this, Terry. You don't make money out of writing a book. I'd make more money just doing one speech at a client tomorrow afternoon than I would. It's not about that. But having written it all down, I truly believe, even if people dip into chapters that are interesting to them, there is value, and it's a good historical yarn, really, because I like to remind people the 3 things that were on my desk the day I started in recruitment in 1980. It was a phone, a fixed line phone, a pad, and an ashtray, because everybody smoked in the 80s. Not me, but everybody else smoked. And all the people smoked at their desk. People smoked when they were being interviewed. Isn't it amazing to think about that?
Isn't it? Yeah. Drew, you said you had a couple.
And now, guys like you just have your cocaine and forget about this. All right.
So yeah, final question, then we'll let you go. Is there any sort of career advice that you used to give that you now realise was flawed?
Actually, that's a good one, Drew. There's several, but the 2 biggest ones. For years, I used to say what everyone says: never give up. It's about continuing. And you see memes on LinkedIn every day and on Instagram. If you've made 100 calls, make 101. Never give up. Always. It's the stupidest advice. If you're doing something again and again and again, it's not working, give the fuck up. Give up and then pivot, relearn your lesson, and go again with a different plan. I've given up plenty of times. I've closed offices. I've done things. I haven't given up on life. I haven't given up on growth and on running the business. But you don't, I see it, for example, clients saying, make cold calls, make 100 cold calls, because the next one, well, if you're making 100 cold calls and 99 of them go to voicemail, then give up and come up with a different plan to connect with clients. So I think that's bad advice. And the other one is, again, I used to say that career advice: follow your passion. Got to follow your passion. Well, give that advice to all 17-year-olds in Australia and England. We're going to have a whole generation of people sitting on the couch pondering what their passion is. This is what you do. Of course, you've got to work in a job that you love, but you don't know what it is when you're 17. What you got to do is you got to get out there, have a best punt at what you think you're going to like, and then give it 100%. Go the extra mile, work hard, try hard, give more than you take. when you're successful at something, you'll start to love it. And that'll become your passion. You know, I don't think Lionel Messi woke up as a 2-year-old and said, I'm going to be a footballer. What happened was he found he was good at it. And then that became his passion. And he probably became good at it because he worked hard at it. And that's the circular kind of reference. So follow your passion is a poor piece of advice to give a 21-year-old. It's like, yes, let's work out what we think you can do. But the main thing is do it hard, do it well, go the extra mile, exhaust yourself at it. And when success comes, you'll work out what your passion is. And I think that is much better advice than, you know, sit on the couch for a year. Go and take a triple gap year while you work out what your passion is. No, mate, don't do that. Get a job, work hard, and your passion will find you.
Love it. Great. You've given us so many gems. I just want to share a few more shared with us. You talked about the skill of the billing manager and how important it is. You talked about the importance of billing managers being good coaches. You asked a great question. You said, you know, if you were to talk to anybody's consultants or you to interview them and say to them, what does good look like? But they all come out with the same thing. Because you know what, Greg, on that one, I just thought most people you ask, they wouldn't be consistent on what good looks like. Great one. The, you know, building the team and the 100 cups of coffee. By the way, I'm going to use that one. Of course, I'm going to take full credit for it, Greg, when I use it.
Mate, I almost certainly stole it from somebody else, so you go away.
Brilliant, that one. 100 cups of coffee. And the question, what would happen if you were to lose 50% of your gross profits on your perm and 25% on your contract? What would happen to your business? Yeah. Absolutely. Talk about thought-provoking question. Fantastic. And ultimately, it's about choice. And what you said was, the money's great, but what the money gives you is choice to do as you want. And, you know, we call it the independence. Fantastic. But I think the biggest lesson about you, Drew, and that I'm going to take away, is to fit your business and travel arrangements around major sports.
Yeah, I've got better at that. I've got better at that as my life became more my own. I mean, it wasn't always that way. But now I would say I've got it down to a very, very fine art. I'm extremely good at it. And I think I'm arriving in London on the Thursday night. On the Friday, I've got a couple of meetings. And on Saturday, I will be at the Oval. And then my flight leaves 5 hours after the West Ham game, my team, on the following Sunday. And as I explained to my wife, that was just the timing of the flights. I didn't want it that way. What can I do?
Who are West Ham playing?
Manchester United.
Oh, are they?
Oh.
I think so, yeah.
Awesome.
And they beat them last year at home, and they've had a reasonable start to the season. And the reason I'm a West Ham United fan is that my father was born in East London in Forest Gate, and his father played for West Ham in, I don't know, 1910 or something. And so, you know, rugby's my main game. Cricket is more than a game. And, you know, you got to love soccer. And so I will be there watching the Hammers. And as I like to say, being a West Ham fan has meant 50 years of disappointment, but we still love the Irons. What can I tell you?
Fantastic. And look, as you listen to this now, if you've got any doubts about reading this book, put them aside and just get the book, regardless of your experience. I've been in the industry longer than I care to remember, 20 plus years, and I learned so much from this book. And truly, all joking apart, it's one of the best recruitment books out there right now. It really is. We're going to get you back to talk about the acquisitions, because there's so much there that you can share with us.
Yeah, look, that is an important topic. I'll leave you with this teaser. Most acquisitions in recruitment, in my view, lead to disappointment for both seller and buyer. And I know the reasons why, because I've made all the mistakes. I've also sold my own business 3 times, so I've been on both sides. And, you know, to make 15 acquisitions, I don't know, I haven't counted it, but you probably have 200 acquisition discussions, and some of them go a long way before they fall over. You know, it's time consuming. Can work well. There's also some great stories where, you know, where 1 and 1 makes 3 and everyone benefits. That's fabulous, but it's rare, actually. It's rare.
It's rare. Fantastic. Again, Greg, thank you very much indeed. And thanks for giving it time to show us about the book. just to, again, go back to the website. It's gregsavage.com.au, and there's then a link to the book. Go and pre-order your book now. It's a must-read book for anybody in the recruitment search industry. Absolute must-read book. Greg, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Drew,
Thank you both of you. It's a pleasure chatting to you. I wish you the best, and we'll do the acquisition one, in a few months, and let people digest this.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. Thank you very much. Until next time, guys. Take care, take action, and be relentless. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Bye bye.